Hello, it is Jack Gill, and welcome back to The Academy. Obviously, it's a new look to the channel, but the content is still the same. This week, me and James are joined by Steven, or you might know him as Esteemed Kompany. He is obviously the main guy to go to if you want Manchester City content. Certain stuff I've seen on your Twitter over the last few weeks about that, Steven. But we're here today to talk about the academy and particularly Manchester City's academy, which, like their first team, they have lots of very good talent within their academy. Before we get into the academy at Manchester City, me and James, first of all, just wanted to talk about James Balaguezi, a young player at Liverpool, now who, you know, is a youngster who we snatched off Manchester City at scholar level at the time. City were quite annoyed at that. Obviously, we spoke before going on air, Stephen. You're not too proud of this guy.
No, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of him, but that doesn't mean anything because City have loads of talents constantly coming in and out the doors at the age of 14, 15 all the time. But the one thing for certain is that if he was at City, he probably was a good footballer, you know. So, like, we don't really get young lads through who aren't obviously have some kind of ability. But personally, I'd not come across him because he hadn't reached under 18s yet. But he sounds like a good talent for what I can hear. Yeah,
James, he's a lad that we've not really got to see too much of over the last couple of years due to injuries and other things. But this season, he's really relishing, isn't he? And we can see why Manchester City were so annoyed about losing him to us.
Yeah, I mean,
I've just seen actually. Sorry, he joined us in under 11s. No wonder I didn't see him. So he joined Liverpool as a 10-year, 11-year-old. So no, I'll let myself off there for not realising who he was.
But yeah, over the last few years, we've not really got to see him too much, have we, James? So, you know, for him now to be relishing the opportunity and to be doing so well for us is fantastic to see.
Yeah, I mean, last season we only saw him, play about 10 times, but he scored 4 goals and assisted once, and he sort of burst onto the scene as, you know, still a schoolboy really, and we didn't really know what to expect of him, but he's been more of a mainstay this season. Obviously, he'd already appeared about 11 or 12 times and got a couple of assists, and he isn't necessarily the focal point that he was last season, but I think that's a lot more to do with the fact that the squad's constantly changing and we're not sort of seeing, you know, your Leighton Stewarts and stuff featuring for the under 18s as much. So he's evolved his game, and yet he's still putting out, you know, decent numbers, and he's putting in decent performances too.
Yeah, certainly one of our best performers and most consistent performers in that under-18 side this season. But without further ado, let's go into the main purpose of this video. Let's talk about the wonderful crop of talent that Manchester City have coming through their academy. Stephen, your owners and City as a football club get a lot of criticism for the way money is spent, and, you know, that oil money thing gets spoken about a lot. But one thing that I will praise Manchester City for is, well, I'm lucky to go to university, and the facilities at the Etihad is my university. And to see what your owners have done with the academy and the amount of money that he's put into the facilities for these young players is outstanding to see.
Yeah, no, City have invested an awful lot, and there's many reasons to do that. Obviously, you want to make it attractive to any young player all around the world who wants to kind of further their education as not just a footballer, as a human being as well. And it's also, I guess, it's also a bit of a cash cow potentially, you know, moving these players on at some point, and while also hoping to get through to the first team. And City's owners, whether we like it or not, I like it. I'm sure some of you guys won't like it, but City's owners, they do excellence, you know, and it's the same for every level. You know, the women's facilities are amazing, the academy's facilities are amazing, the first team facilities are amazing. It's all about incremental gains. You know, every extra 1% you add in terms of quality, you know, you're smoothing out the edges of 10 little things, and you've got an extra 10% of quality around the whole team, you know, in general, and that kind of stuff feeds into it. So the academy of the CFA is, as you know, it's just a phenomenal place. It really is. It's like a football haven there, and the fact that these players get the opportunities and the facilities that they do, it was inevitable that, you know, that there was going to be someone like a Phil Foden eventually, and there's going to be this crop of talent that we currently got because they take it so seriously. And obviously, I want to see more academy players in the first team, but I do appreciate how difficult that is.
And James, I don't know whether you've been lucky enough to see the campus that they have at the Etihad and the facilities they've got there, but we've seen similarities between what Liverpool have done in the past, couple of seasons, with us now moving to that joint training facility in Kirby. And, that's the way forward in football, isn't it? Helping bridge the gap between the academy and the first team.
Yeah, definitely. We can see that, with the hiring of certain staff members, like, is it Vita Matos as well, having specific staff there to bridge that gap between the first team and the academy, because it's all right calling up a few lads each week to training, but if you've not got staff there who understand these players but also understand the needs of the first team, then you throw them in at the deep end when they're, you're not really unsure what kind of qualities they bring. And so, City have been, ahead of the game now for a little while with their recruitment, the way they do things, and it's a credit to the owners, because as you said, they are sort of specialists in success, and if they're going to do something, they're clearly going all out. And I think a lot of clubs, even Liverpool to an extent, should take note of some of the brilliant work they've done.
United are similar.
Yeah,
United are similar. What I know is that for years they've essentially United just relied on, and this is not coming from a bit of Man City fan perspective. It's just a fact. They relied for an awful long time with the brilliance of Alex Ferguson to kind of cover over some of the deficiencies for how the setup. And I know for fact United's academy was lagging miles behind Man City, and they've improved it recently, but it was miles behind because they got a little bit complacent, I guess. No, we're Man United, everyone will come to us, and it might have been an element of that for Liverpool as well. But then Everton obviously started to get some talents, didn't they? That kind of stuff, and you can get left behind so easily these days if one kind of club has a little bit of ambition, and the City did that. So it does make a difference. The players care about it. The young players care about it. And I know it's not like City. United did it as well. United were behind for a while, and even Carrington, their training ground, it does need some investment. Will they do it? They probably feel like they don't need to, but it is a thing that you can get left behind easily.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, because I think it's quite naive often to criticise City with their money and how they spend it, because even though they do, quite a lot of the time, I recall very little times where City have got it wrong when they've invested a lot of money, and that's at first team level and with all the stuff involving their academy. And as we're going to speak about in a moment, some of this crop of talent, specifically in the City under-23s, and it's the same crop that we faced in the Youth Cup final a couple of seasons ago at the Etihad campus, and they're all coming through as under-23 players now. They're really looking good, and we're going to focus on a few of them now. I want to start with Liam Delap, because for me, he is the one that every time I've gone to see City in the flesh live against Liverpool, he has stood out, because this lad has a bit of everything, Stephen. He really does. And my question for you today is, there's a lot of things going around the rumour mill about City looking for a striker in the summer to replace Sergio Aguero, who looks like he's on his way out. Does Liam Delap deserve more opportunities in the first team?
Yes and no. I mean, it's difficult to say. Obviously, has he just turned 18 or is he still 17? Yeah, I think he's just turned 18. Sorry?
He's 18.
He's 18 last week. Yeah, so the point either way, he's still very young. The grand scheme of things, and in terms of football, he's still a baby, really. So he deserves a chance. The fact that he's a talented, hardworking young footballer, but it's just so difficult to get in, into this squad. I mean, if Delap's playing, you're telling. It means Aguero's not playing. It would mean Gabriel Jesus is not playing. It would mean Ferran Torres who's not playing. It would mean you're not. And what manager wouldn't also then just play? Someone who's proven to do pretty well at false nine, like I don't know, Gundogan or Kevin De Bruyne or even Phil Foden. So it's basically you can be a brilliant young talent, but there is always a pecking order. And I want Delap to play more. I definitely do, but I also understand that. Pep gets it right. I can't sit here and moan after, I know unfortunately the winning runs come to an end from a City fan's perspective, but if we literally won 21 games in a row, I can't turn around and go, yeah, but I can't do that. I just can't, because it doesn't make any sense, So I can want it, and I guess I definitely want it to happen more, but at the same time, I can't tell Pep what to do, and I can't say he gets it right 99% of the time. And it's very easy to sit here and go, I wish he played more youth players, and he should play more youth players. But his job is to win trophies, but Delap is a fantastic young player. I mean, I do think he has the ability to go to the top. The one thing I've learned from following academy football is that it's definitely never worth getting your hopes up, because I used to be there, sat there and going, Sancho, Foden, and Brahim, and Lati Bodier, and Matt Smith and this underrated team, everyone will make it for first team. I used to believe that. Then I realised quickly it doesn't work that way. As good as they are as footballers, there's a massive gap between being a star on the 23 level, even as a 17-year-old, then to get into the first team. I mean, it's so big, you can't even fit on camera. It's like massive. It's huge. It's a massive gap, and not just because they haven't got the ability, because there's so many variables. It's luck. It requires like an awful lot of luck. You just have to hope someone gets almost like injured or suspended so you actually get a chance in the first place. You have to prove to be better than world-class footballers. You have to also have the right desire, the right drive. You have to hope there's a chance for you. You have to impress the manager. And it's just so many sliding door moments in football. Like, for example, we're looking at Saturday watching Rashford be a first-team player for Man United, but he was never involved in the England youth setup. He wasn't even rated that highly, it's at youth level. And then he got a chance because of injured players in the academy side and then the first side. So that's what I'm on about looking to. Then obviously he took to it like a duck to water, but he was never really that highly rated. And that sounds crazy, but people can go research it, but he literally wasn't. He wasn't like, some of these kids that we all hype up massively. So I guess the point I'm making is Delap's fantastic. But as much as I'd like to see him play more, I understand why he hasn't. And I actually think the reason Guardiola hasn't played him more is because he doesn't trust him. Not because he's not good enough, but because he's a bit of a hothead. Like he is. He's an aggressive player and he gets himself sent off. And I remember him getting booked against Leicester, even though he came on and hit the crossbar with a header in the first team. We got battered that day against Leicester, but he came on and hit the crossbar, got himself booked for a silly little challenge. And I know I can't say for a fact, but I have a very strong feeling that Guardiola doesn't like players he deems reckless. He doesn't like players that he can't control. And Guardiola's a manager about control and rhythm and flow and organisation. And there was a moment when Fabian Delph got himself sent off once where you could see Guardiola was like that. He just annoyed him. And I reckon with Delap, he feels he's a little bit too raw. Just a little bit too raw still. He needs to, as talented as he is, he's brilliant. As talented as he is, I think he really thinks he needs to grow up a little bit, because maybe he doesn't trust him yet. And that's not necessarily fair, but also at the same time, it makes an awful lot of sense, if that makes.
Yeah, and like you said, over the years, Pep Guardiola has been very good at managing young talent, especially with City. I'll point to Phil Foden, for example. We've seen his capabilities for years, and I've one that's not shied away from the fact that I think when Phil Foden retires, he will be the best English talent that England has ever had. That is my honest opinion on Phil Foden. But looking at things, his management of Phil Foden and his game management, it's only been this season where he's really started to get a lot of game time for Manchester City. And I feel like you said, though we can all see the talent of Liam Delap and that he has a lot to his game. And though there is stuff to work on, he does seem to have a lot to his game already. And, I don't think it will be long before he gets more first team opportunities. But like you say, there's stuff for him to work on. And there's also, there's also a reason for us to remember that he's still only 18 and he's still got plenty of time ahead of him. But James, do you think, we speak about this a lot, and we'll speak about this about a few more players that I'm going to mention in a moment, but, under 23s football, it's very easy for young players to outgrow that. And do you think for players like Liam Delap, and we'll speak about a few more in a minute, but do you feel like a loan opportunity may be the right way for them to go?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because we talked about this last week with a few of the young lads at the Liverpool setup, like Jake Kane and Leighton Clarkson, where they cleared a level above everyone else they're playing with, despite still being quite young for that specific level. And so you need to make the decision of whether a few substitute appearances and travelling for the first team week in, week out is going to be more beneficial for them than going out on loan, because nothing's going to replicate that kind of experience they get playing senior, competitive men's football. But then at the same time, certain managers do like to have these talents close so they can mould them into a certain way, as we've seen with Phil Foden. So I think it's going to be a tough decision for whoever's making these decisions at Manchester City, and have to weigh up the pros and cons of sending them out and letting them do their own thing and hope that they can refine these skills somewhere else.
The thing is, as well, it's not even about being good enough sometimes. It's just literally about the queue of players in front of you. Like, I mean, if Sancho stayed at Man City, he possibly might have barely got any game time anyway, because it might have been a case of just one of Foden or Sancho who got that token substitute appearance off the bench, because it's all very well good saying, put Foden and Sancho on the bench when they were there, but that means he leaves off some £60 million, I don't know, some established international footballer. And if you're a manager, your job is always going to, you're priority pretty much always is going to keep the proven top quality players who have friends and in the dressing room and who have influence in the dressing room who put it this way, it's easier to make a youth player unhappy or whatever because they don't know any different than it is to upset an international established footballer because that causes problems. So you have to balance these things. And like, I always used to think, oh, well, can't they just tell Mahrez this week he's sitting on the bench and we're going to put Sancho there? Like, well, no, not Sancho, but someone like that. But they're never going to do that. And like, I wouldn't do that either, really, if I was a manager. Of course I wouldn't, because I'd be like, I could easily say as a fan, but then I'd be like, well, no, I would rather Mahrez than Cole Palmer on the bench because Mahrez is a former Premier League Player of the Year. Or I'd even rather Ferran Torres because he's like, even though he's 20 million, not quite a superstar, he's still got a hat-trick against Germany, for Spain. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's so easy to say. It's just, I think as a youth player these days to get through at a top club, you just genuinely need luck. You need an awful lot of luck and be in the right place at the right time. And because it's so difficult. Like, and it's the same. It's the situation for Delap big time. Good as he is, I think he probably needs a loan. Not because he's not good enough, but just because City going to sign some big striker in the summer. And Jesus will still be there, and there'll be 2 or 3 senior midfielders who'll probably get ahead of him even then through the middle. So I think Delap alone would be a really good deal for him.
And is that a worry for you, Stephen? Because with how good City's first team is at the moment, there will be a downside of that, and it will be that you lose a lot of very good young talent because of that. Does that worry you in the slightest?
Yeah, but I guess it's relative to the overall bigger picture. I mean, as long as the players get through every now and then, like I'm not expecting 8 first-team players. I think it's just never going to happen if managers have got money to spend. And any manager in the world would spend the money if they had it like Guardiola did. They all would choose that option because it's easier. It is easier. I mean, but Foden's got through. Foden has made it. And it's also worth bearing in mind, even though he's probably going to leave, Garcia got through and Lee was playing a lot last season. So all of a sudden we had 2 academy players who were literally just first-team players, and like, that's not bad, It's not great, but it's not bad, to have 2 teenagers who were starting towards the end of last season. And Garcia obviously he's made his bed now, and he's off to Barca, and City have got better centre backs now. But the point is, as long as there's a hint of a hope, I don't mind too much. I mean, as long as that if the loans mean something, so for example, imagine we loan Liam Delap out. I mean, I would love to have seen him like as an emergency loan for Brighton or something like that this season, because the team that can play loads of great football can't score goals. He could have been such an interesting like plan B for them off the bench. But anyway, imagine he went on loan to, I don't know, a top championship side next season. So he's got all the ability. Championships are very high level. People underestimate how high level football the championship is. He goes there and he has, I don't know, a Tammy Abraham or a Rhian Brewster level season where he scores 25 goals or whatever. I want to see that then matter. I don't mind if we loan players out, as long as it matters, as long as that therefore means, right, we're going to take a look at you, not just we're going to sell you on. Or if we do sell them on, just have a reasonable buyback and keep it cordial, keep that relationship open. Because I understand that we may have to loan players out or even sell them with a buyback, essentially, because those sales of a buyback essentially become developmental fees. You know what I mean? It could be like we put a buyback of 20 million, but we give them for 2 years and go, well, 2 years, 10 million a season, and we've now got a 90 million pound striker. So it could be one of those things where they look at it that way. I don't mind players leaving on loan, or as long as there is a route back for them, if they show how good they are, because I think that's just how football's going for clubs like Manchester City, because I don't think we can have 5 talented young players in the first team at the same time at the moment, because that means 3 or 4 senior players are also dropping out. So...
And James, City are 5 points clear of the under-23s Premier League 2 at the moment this season. And this is for a simple reason, isn't it? And it's because it's not just Liam Delap. There's a crop of fantastic young talent at Manchester City this season. You're talking James McAtee, Cole Palmer, Tommy Doyle, players like that who any side would be very lucky to have.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, clearly, as you said before, they're doing a lot of right things and they're bringing through these players. And, luckily, they're making that step up each season. The likes of Palmer, McAtee, they've made that step up in the last sort of 12 months seamlessly, and they've continued that form when, a lot of players, we've seen even Liverpool players make that step up after having good campaigns, and it's just not worked out for them and their careers have petered out. But these young lads are making that step up, and they're continuing the work they've been doing so far. So it's brilliant to see, despite, obviously being Liverpool fans ourselves, we still like to see young players come through the system. And as long as these players are getting minutes somewhere and, they have a future and, as you say, and being loaned out with no hope of coming back, then it's all credit to City, really, because they have an action plan and they're enacting it pretty well.
Then, Stephen, I wanted to talk to you about Cole Palmer as well, because I saw on your Twitter the other day there was a couple of comparisons to Pires, and I've seen that, myself in his style. We're not comparing him directly with Pires, but it's the sort of style that he applies and has to his game. Now, he's had a couple of first-team opportunities this season. Obviously, in Premier League 2, he's scored 8 goals and 2 assists in 9 games. Some of those goals have been incredibly well finished as well. I saw Rob earlier on in the season, which was just delightful to see. He's another one that looks an outstanding talent.
Cole Palmer's fantastic. I mean, the first time I saw him, he reminded me of Nasri, actually. The Arsenal era Nasri, the one who glides past players, and that deceptively fast. In terms of like stop-start. That's what Nasri did. He always brought a player dead, then just glide past him with acceleration burst. And he reminds you of that. But the one thing I'm excited about Cole Palmer is that he's captain sides before as well. So you've got this exceptionally gifted young footballer who genuinely, technically, I mean, one thing I will say about young players is all you can ever do as a fan is look at whether they have the technical ability to make it. And Cole Palmer does, Delap does, McAtee does, Tommy does. But then obviously, after that, it's just luck, chance, whatever. But Cole Palmer has that ability. He's so technically gifted. The way he glides past people, the way he finishes like a forward, that chip you were on about, that sumptuous chip, that was pure Pires. It was pure Pires, and I can definitely see that to his game. And his versatility as well will see him in good. He can play as a false 9. He can play in the right wing. He can play as a more traditional kind of like number, a false 8 or something like that. And that's why he played for the first team against, I think it was Burnley, and he was very good that day as well. And I guess, once again, his problem is more just that Foden exists. So Foden's got that token young slot, and once again, Gundogan and Bernardo and Silva, and there's just so many players, basically. But Palmer is one I'm almost certain. Once again, he needs luck, but I'm certain has the ability to go very far in this game because he is as good as the young player. He's more or less as good as anything you'll see at youth level, unless it's Messi. You know what I mean? Unless it's someone who's just a freakishly good. He's as good as he was too good. I watched him versus West Ham yesterday, scoring a hat trick, and he was just too good. Literally, like he was taking the mick out of them, and they couldn't get a foot on him. That burst of acceleration, that very very cultured left foot. His work rate's excellent. You've got essentially a complete attacking midfield there, stroke wide forward, who will score goals, who will create goals, who has that little bit of arrogance as well that you want from a forward player. I do think you genuinely need a little bit of self-belief and a little bit of like je ne sais quoi, so a little bit special. You know what I mean? And like it's like Mahrez with work rate. That's what he reminds me a little bit as well. It's just a fantastic player. I really, really rate him, and he's one I would be disappointed as well that Pep didn't take a closer look at, given his style, I guess, because he's so Guardiola in everything he does.
It's like you say, though, isn't it? It's like we spoke about before. He's at the level where he's too good for the under-23s. He shouldn't be stuck there.
And he's so young as well. Still, that's the crazy thing. It's like I think he's still only 18, isn't he? Until is it October or is it July? It's one of the two of them. I think it's October. Or is it July? Yeah. I can't either way. He's 18. It's one of the things like, what does he do? Does he do what Luis Fiorini did? He's 18 until May, actually. So he's 19 at the start of next season, which isn't too young to go out on loan. So I suspect if he can't be under 23 level next season. He's mastered it. He's completed it. There's nothing for him to do under 23 level, and he's only 19 still. So that for him is he won't get in the first team, not because he's not good enough, just because he's not going to make that step because Man City will probably sign some players in the summer. And so what does he do? Like, does he go on loan next year? I mean, that's probably the only real option for him. And then where does he go on loan? Does he? Yeah, it's difficult because I reckon this is where hopefully City will start to use their extensive City football group clubs or whatever. But he definitely needs a challenge now. And I don't want to see him at NEC Breda personally. I don't want to see him in second tier Dutch football where it's barely that much better than the academy football anyway, because it is literally playing youth teams. He's playing youth teams. It's good for certain players. It's good for like Luis Fiorini, who's a little bit, who instead of playing a year at this level, Luis Fiorini at the same age played a year against men at least, But I feel like now as a year older, he needs as a 19-year-old, he'll need something a little bit more than that level, in my opinion. But that's the $1 million question. That's why they're paid big bucks to try and make decisions. And City haven't always been great at this, if I'm being honest, getting the pathways right. But fingers crossed we can with Cole Palmer because he's so good.
And this is the thing, James, isn't it? We've seen a similar thing at Liverpool with Harvey Elliott, who we know is probably too good for youth level, and we've seen him go out to Blackburn Rovers on loan this season and excel. And City have several players that we're talking about here who are capable of the same thing.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we've seen the quality of Harvey Elliott. We've seen that he has been able to cut it at senior level, playing at a particularly young age in the Championship. And I have no doubt the likes of Palmer, McAtee, Doyle as well, are fully capable of cutting it in the men's game, because technically, as you said, they're superb. But when you make that step up to the first team, those players ahead of you are there because they're also technically superb. And suddenly you're not the biggest kid in the yard anymore. You're amongst men who are further along. And so the qualities that you bring don't match up in the same way. So you need to go. And I would say personally, going out on loan is the best thing to do, because you are able to test yourself. You're able to say, okay, Gaffer, I am ready to play senior football. I'm ready to make that step up, or I'm ready to be moved on somewhere else. Because we've seen with the likes of Harry Wilson, keeping players around on loan just because they're talented and might make it to the first team isn't good enough, because you're 23, 24 and you're still being loaned out and you haven't got a stable club.
And James McAtee is the next name, Stephen. He has had a particularly good season. I was reading an article by the MEN before this who said that he's following in the footsteps of Phil Foden. He's a dynamic attacking midfielder. He can play in that centre forward position as well, or even deeper in central midfield. 18, he's flying this season, 6 goals and 7 assists, I believe, in 16 appearances. What have you made of him?
McAtee is fantastic. I know I keep saying it sounds like a stuck record, but and I've said this a few times now, but I mean this for McAtee more than anyone. If Foden did exist and he was coming through around at the same time as Foden, he would be playing now for the first team, simply because he's more like the guy that everyone said Foden was like. He's more like David Silva. Like Foden was much more. I actually coined, by the way, I genuinely did coin the stop putting the Esther thing. Like, so I actually got proof of it. First place on the internet of it. But I always felt he was more like Iniesta Foden in terms of how you dribble past people. And you wouldn't see that from a young David Silva. You saw a bit of it, but Iniesta was gliding and weaving and doing slalom and past people. But McAtee is that half space kind of guy. He's that guy who plays those little passes into the winger behind. You think of David Silva, you think David Silva mastered that little bit, like when you go into the area just between the 6-yard box and the edge of the area, around there. He was always there, David Silva, in that half space between, just behind the defenders, between the fullbacks and centre forwards, picking up the ball and pulling it back, or just playing those little free balls behind Sane. McAtee is just David Silva, that kind of way. But actually David Silva who can finish, which is he's so basically it has that there's a Spanish term called pausa, and it essentially means Guardiola is obsessed with it. Apparently, it's like players who know when to speed up the game and when to slow down the game. And he always keeps saying the reason he's playing Foden out wide is because he hasn't quite learned how to do that yet. He doesn't know how to adjust the tempo. He doesn't know how to calm and breathe and all that kind of stuff, or have pause, as they call it over in Spain. And where the likes of Silva, Xavi, Gundogan, for example, has it. Bernardo doesn't have it as well. Bernardo is very much energy and De Bruyne is all energy. But you do need some players who know when to recycle possession. And McAtee, for me, is so gifted. He's so talented. He can score special goals. The way he moves and just kind of rolls the ball around the pitch dictates play, but then we'll play that beautiful those little 8-9 yard passes that are just so lovely to watch. They're not like Hollywood passes like De Bruyne does or whatever, which are great fun, but it's those little slide rule ones that look so easy, but certain players do them more often and do them more accurate than everyone else because they see it and they make players move around or they manipulate that space. And McAtee is another, once again, he's already completed this level. He's only 18. I think he turns 19 in October, but he should definitely be playing somewhere else. I think Morgan Rogers is doing really well at Leyton Orient, and I would say McAtee, Palmer, Delap, Doyle, they're better players than Morgan Rogers in my personal opinion. But the point I guess I'm making there is Morgan Rogers is a good player. He's a very good young talent, but I think these are even better. Not to say that Morgan Rogers might have a better career, by the way, because once again, doesn't mean they could be more naturally talented, but he could just go further because that's how football works sometimes. And great, and I mean this with all due respect, Jordan Henderson. He's obviously not the most technically gifted footballer in the world, but he's a great example of someone like Darren Fletcher, for example, who went to the very top of the game because they're so focused. And obviously he's underrated technically because he wouldn't be able to get where he is, but he's not David Silva. You know what I mean? He's not. But Tommy Doyle is a good example of someone who could do the same thing, by the way. He could go further than any of them, but though he is very good technically, but his work rate, his energy, and his just overall. But McAtee, to me, just a brilliant, elegant attacking midfielder who, more than probably any young player in City's academy team, has that understanding of pace and control and precision that Guardiola absolutely loves. But it's just difficult because that door is closed. Not because he's not good enough, it's just because everyone else is too good. So fingers crossed for him then that we handle it right, because I don't even know. Like, there's so many. Then we're looking at Alex Robertson from the under-18s, and we're looking at Josh Adam, who just signed. Luis Fiorini's done brilliant out on loan, and Morgan Rogers, and then there's too many. There's just too many.
Yeah, and it's interesting Stephen talks about that pauser thing, James, because watching the first team, it's so easy to tell that that's what Guardiola loves. I think it's been more obvious this season than any that, that they like to play that slow build-up game, and they like to keep the ball, and then all of a sudden they'll burst the game into life. And we know watching the academy on a regular basis, we know that so often now teams like to build their academies and build their youth sides exactly like the first team. So it's so easy to integrate that step up from academy football to the first team, and with City having that ability to do that, like he says, James McAtee has, is crucial for their development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we see these players that are technically brilliant and can score goals, assists all day long, but it's easy to say throw them in the first team because they can cut it. But if they haven't got that ability to manage games, then you're completely throwing off the rest of the team. So, for example, we want to see Curtis Jones get more minutes for Liverpool a season ago, but he wasn't this well-rounded player. Okay, he was technically brilliant, but he didn't have the understanding of the game that the likes of your James McAtees have, where they're able to come in and they understand their role and they understand specifically how the manager wants them to play and wants them to influence the game, whether that's recycling possession at certain times when you're trying to manage a result, or whether that's accelerating the team forward.
Curtis Jones, by the way, is a good example of opportunity once again. As good a footballer as he is, I think we all know he wouldn't be playing regularly right now if it wasn't for injuries. I mean, that's not a dig at him. It's just a fact, It's just one of those things where he's getting this regular game time because Henderson and Fabinho have to play in defence, and it's weird, isn't it? He's a very talented young footballer who could have barely stepped foot in the first team without some of your best players being injured. And football is just funny like that sometimes.
And he's another one, Stephen, who I'm sure you probably got to see him at academy level, not as much as me and James, but I'm sure you're all aware of him. Completely different player, inside forward, like to beat the same man 4 or 5 times before he got shot away. He was so key to Steven Gerrard's under 18s, and then obviously we saw last year in Neil Critchley's under 23 side, he shone. But it's his evolution of a player that's now made him into the footballer that we see appearing in the Premier League today. As that typical Klopp number 8 that we've seen him, or even where he's playing more off the left-hand side, and that versatility that he provides, that there's been little inklings of things there that you can tell that he can make it to the first team, but with a bit of work from world-class coaches such as Jurgen Klopp and all his backroom sides, and it's the same with City with Pep Guardiola. They can work on raw talent like that and make them first-team players.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no linear path to the top, and so many young players, even so many senior players. I mean, like Zinchenko was attacking midfielder, and now he's a left back for Man City. It just happens at any level. But I guess there's the whole with youth. There's the impetuous of youth. Like, young players are overeager. They love to try and be the star, and you can take a little bit of time to develop. And as you said, Curtis Jones changes his game so much. I mean, that's testament to the coaches. I mean, even City are seeing a current little thing. Adrian Bernabé has been attacking midfielder who often played as a right winger, cutting in very David Silva, has played left back recently and done actually pretty well. And he's like slight, and you'd never in a million years think that, but he has a natural drive and energy, and you just never know where a player's going to end up. And Steven Gerrard, when he was a young player, was often much more of a right winger than a midfielder and all that kind of stuff. And players change all the time, and I guess that's probably why it's worth clubs not giving up on players, see how they develop, see how they go through, their education, see how they act on loan. And see where it goes. I mean, I mentioned it before as well from a City perspective, because obviously I've seen more the City lads than the Liverpool ones. But Luis Fiorini, very much a number 8, number 10. He often played as a false 9 as well, basically a goal-scoring midfielder. He's been played at NEC Braid as a number 6, kind of quite deep and just kind of dictating play. But that's another step towards, where he maybe could be there one day. But either way, it's all beneficial for him. You do need to learn to be versatile. And I think you probably don't really know what you're going to be anyway until you're playing first team football regularly these days, because as a youth player, you're all energy and ideas, and until someone hones you anyway. So Curtis Jones is a good example of that, I guess.
Well, cheers, gents. Thank you for that. And that was the Academy, our first video of the new look, and we were joined by Steven. Make sure you check him out, his Twitter and his YouTube account, of course, and we shall see you very soon. Ta-ra.